Hey y'all, my name is Darby. If you are new to my channel, welcome. I hope you guys like listening to me talk about my books. And I don't know what else to say other than we're just gonna get right into it. We're gonna be talking about Golden Sun, which is the second book in the Red Rising Trilogy. I put out a video last week about my review and kind of synopsis of Red Rising. So if you aren't familiar with it, you can watch that video for more detailed explanation, but essentially it's like a sci-fi fantasy novel, space colonization of our planetary system, and it's a color-based society, and it follows our male main character, Darrow. So again, in this book, we start out with Darrow. He is in the Academy, which is kind of like the Institute 2.0. He's ruling a Starfleet. He has some of his friends from the previous book with him. He has Roke and Tactus. He also has another friend that we get to know a little bit more throughout this book, and her name is Victra, and she is Antonia's older sister. Now, that already comes with some distrust because we do not trust Antonia at all in her bloodline after what happened in the first book, but she kind of wins it over, and as you read this book, you come to like sort of understand her and care about her. In this academy, they're ruling like a Starfleet, and Darrow is about to win when it's basically taken away from him by Karnas having some unseen ship that takes them out. And Darrow's loss of the Academy is also a huge loss of glory for Augustus. And Augustus decides, well, you know what? I'm selling your contract, buddy. We're getting rid of you. And this is basically a death sentence for Darrow, considering that the only reason he is still able to live and carry on is that the Balanas can't really touch him with the Augustus name attached to him. So with him gonna be up for sale, he could literally be taken into any house and basically sold for slaughter, essentially. So this is a terrifying moment for Darrow. They decide that he will have his contract sold at this thing, some kind of gala. I don't really remember what exactly the importance of it is other than like in this scenario. It's something that happens yearly, but essentially at this third day of this gala, he's gonna be sold. On the first day, he is in like his rooms and he gets approached by Victra and says that someone would like to meet with him. And he decides to trust her, and he goes and he meets up with the Jackal. And the Jackal is Augustus's son that was spared in the last book. That was the like psychopath that was against Darrow, but now he decides that he will pay for Darrow's contract and says that he will come up with money in order to save Darrow if they form an alliance. Darrow, surprisingly enough, decides that, yeah, this will be a good idea. He obviously doesn't trust the Jackal because he knows he's up to no good, but it's the desperation. I mean, he knows that it's a possible death sentence, so he decides to form this alliance. And while he is sitting with the Jackal, one of the characters from the previous book that he had like saved, that was a pink, that was with wings, all that, she was saved and was with the Sons of Ares. She enters and he figures out that there's some kind of plot going on here. Something's wrong. It ends up being a bombing, but Darrow ends up saving the Jackal from this death. And Darrow is taken to go see Harmony. And Harmony was one of the personnel that he talked to with the Sons of Ares. And Harmony informs him that Dancer is dead, which was originally their leader, and that she is now orchestrating these bombings that we kind of read about in the beginning of the book. And she says that she wants Darrow to bomb the gala where he's supposed to have his contract sold in order to take down the society. Darrow is not convinced on this method, and so they pull up the footage that they had of Eos hanging, and they basically have the audio of her last words that she'd said to her sister that Darrow still did not know, and it essentially shows that she was pregnant. And so Darrow has this renewed rage at these golds and how not only did they take away his wife, but they took away his future, his children, his family. And so there's a renewed sense of rage, and he decides to agree. When he gets to this gala, he almost sets off the bomb, but he internally thinks back and thinks of Eo's dream and essentially is like, this isn't what she would want. It isn't right. I'm gonna take her dreams into account because Harmony isn't going to follow Eo's dream. And if I'm the only one that can carry it, I'm not going to die without fulfilling this dream. So he decides to instead get up on the table of the Balanas in this and declares a duel against Cassius. At this duel, any duels like this are a duel to the death, and Cassius at this time is rumored to be an Olympic knight, which is almost like this little like army around the sovereign. He's rumored to be an Olympic knight with the sovereign, and so this is quite a big challenge. It's not only against the Balana blood feud, but essentially also to the sovereign and her power. So he decides to duel Cassius and proves that he is more than advanced at his use of the razor, which is the weapon of choice, because he was trained by Lorne, the Rage Knight, who has since retired. And he ends up severing Cassius's arm, and then is about to pull the killing move when the sovereign stops this duel and changes the rules. And by doing this, she is essentially asserting that she has more power than she actually does. So in these duels, nobody's supposed to have any say. Even the sovereign themselves is not supposed to be able to stop and say that this is fine enough, like you can yield, it is not to the death, that kind of thing. So in doing this, she is showing her favor to the Balanas, and especially to Cassius, and Darrow takes this into account and essentially uses this to spark a civil war. So after this happens, a fight breaks out around this duel. All the families start clashing together. Augustus's supporters against the people that are with the sovereign and the Balana. And through this madness, it starts the beginnings of this civil war, and it just progresses from there. So that is the condensed, spoiler-free version that I can give you. And in this next little bit that I'm gonna start talking about, it's gonna have some spoilers. So if you yourself wanted to read this book, I would stop here. If you aren't interested in reading the book, or you already have and just kind of wanna hear a little bit more about it, a little recap if you're wanting to reread it, or if you just have some thoughts and wanna see what somebody else thinks, then carry on, stick around. All right, so I'm gonna kind of go a little bit back. At this gala, him deciding that he was gonna call this duel when he made a very rash decision. He essentially is changing the paradigm again. He had this thought of what Eo had said to him in the first book, and it was that if you will rise, they will follow. And this was what inspired him to end up going against what Harmony had wanted, because he said, she had this dream for me. She saw what I could do, and that is not what someone else can do. This is not what Harmony wants to do. So I'm gonna end up taking this, and we're gonna go with it. When the sovereign stopped the killing of Cassius, she obviously showed her favor for someone. And after this occurs and the fighting goes out, Darrow is actually taken to see the sovereign herself. And she offers Darrow a position as an Olympic knight with her. And Darrow is obviously very confused by this action. Obviously it shows that he has some kind of power and is a very powerful person, very persuasive. He has people that will follow him, and so it's quite an easy thing to be like, hey, I will give you an amazing position and you will have hundreds of soldiers behind you that you will lead. And so she tries to break that appeal to him, but that's not Darrow's motivations. And one of the things that the sovereign wants to do before she offers him this full position is this game of truth. Essentially, she has like this creature that she uses, and they ask questions, and apparently this creature can sense when someone's lying, and it will bite and like inject some kind of venom that can kill a person. And Darrow agrees, which absolutely insane, terrifying to think about, but he agrees. They play this game, and essentially, I don't know, like he's tactfully answering everything, and then comes to find out that the Sovereign planned to have Augustus killed and overthrown and hand Mars to the Bellona, essentially, or Bellona. I don't know. I don't know how to say it. I don't listen to audiobooks. This is just my eyes, so I don't know. But whatever way you say that, the Bellonas, she was gonna give Mars to them. And so Darrow was like, huh, okay. Ends up going back to the rooms, essentially acts like he's gonna take this position with the Sovereign. And earlier at the gala, Mustang was with Cassius, was like on his arm. Obviously he's paired up with the family, and she's been working with the Sovereign. And whenever he interacted with her earlier in the night, she basically made it out like she has her own plan that she's forming, but she didn't really inform him of it. So after he goes back into this place with the Sovereign, Mustang had interacted with him a little bit in this room while they're playing this game. Mustang had been in the room with Darrow whenever they're having this truth game, and she gave him like a tell that she was with him by putting on a ring, I guess, that he had given her at some point earlier. And she has Severo and the Howlers go and break Darrow out, and Darrow decides to go and save Augustus's family. And meanwhile, he was wanting to give Darrow up, but Darrow is deciding to sacrifice himself in order to save Augustus and keep with this civil war, because obviously this is the way that Darrow plans to break apart the society. So he goes and saves the Bellona, not the Bellona, he goes and saves the Augustuses, and they make it out of this and they get onto these ships. And essentially Darrow calls for an iron rain to come down on Mars, and he wants to fight the Sovereign. So Darrow is basically saying, I'm taking this war to Mars, we're gonna take it over, and is declaring war on the Sovereign as well as the Bellonas. Whenever this proposal of the Iron Rain comes along, Augustus decides to entrust Darrow and like thanks him for saving him, and says that Darrow needs to get Lorne, which is the Rage Knight that had trained him with the Razor, needed to get him to join this war, because then it will sway some of the other houses that are on the other planets that don't really have a side that they picked in the beginning, and they will help them in the war. So Darrow essentially forces Lorne's hand in this, and brings the war to him, and so they forcibly join this war. In the Iron Rain, they do come out victorious. However, plans definitely went awry. So Roke was entrusted with leading the fleet, which was the major reason for this victory. He ended up taking over a lot of the Bellona fleet and winning them a lot of ships. But on the ground, which was where Darrow and Mustang were, Darrow is somewhat, I don't know if it was some kind of internal betrayal, but essentially the plan that they had been sort of found out. And so a lot of the men that he was overseeing ended up dying around him. A lot of the Howlers, and we've already had a lot of deaths leading up to this point. But at this point, Darrow sees that the Sovereign, who would hold herself up in like a tower, was going to escape. And so leaving everyone else behind, he ends up going and himself wants to go and take the Sovereign down. He hops aboard the ship that the Sovereign is trying to take off on, and that has Aja, which is one of just the Olympic Knights that's like a real badass, and Fitchner. So Fitchner in this is an Olympic Knight, and we had kind of found that out whenever they had played this Game of Truth, but it wasn't a super big detail up until now. But Fitchner, who is Severo's dad, which he had talked about in the first book, is there, and he was the proctor, and so he knows Darrow, and essentially the Sovereign's telling them to execute Darrow for this war, and Fitchner tries to say like, no, we can turn him for something, like, you wanted to offer him a position once, we can do it again. Asia is all about like, I'll take him out, I'm here for it. So on this, Darrow had already killed a couple of the other Proteans, which are just, I think it's like the military that's under the Olympic Knights. They have like 100 soldiers behind them. It's like a Protean is one of those people. He had taken out a Protean, and he had taken out a couple other people, and he's ready to just fight to the end of his life. And Fitchner ends up saving Darrow, and they jump out of the ship. So the Sovereign gets away. Fitchner reveals his loyalty to Darrow and ends up saving him. Darrow wakes up from a bed and is in a meeting with Severo, Fitchner, and Dancer. Dancer is alive, and we learn that Fitchner is actually Ares, and that Harmony has gone awry and is doing all these bombings and isn't following the plan that Ares had wanted, and tried to say that Dancer was dead to get Darrow to follow what she wanted. And Severo obviously reveals that he knows who Darrow really is, and he respects him not because of his color but because of like what he is as a person and all of these things. And they reveal that they want Darrow to own this society, and they tell him that Augustus is going to offer to adopt Darrow, and they want for him to accept this adoption and then marry Mustang most likely and end up ruling Mars, and then they want him to work his way up to like ruling the society itself in order to topple it. Darrow is agreeable only if he can reveal the truth. He wants to visit home again and then reveal himself to Mustang, because throughout the book they had very minor interactions, and he still has this love and care for her and just wants to stop lying to her and be able to be truthful, and feels that she's different than other golds and that he can do so, and that she'll accept and will willingly join this. They tell him it's stupid, but he does it anyways. So he goes to Lycos, interacts with his mother, and reveals to Mustang that he is a Red. And there's this really tense moment where she is ready to kill him and is asking him all these questions about like, what are you? Like, what are you wanting to do? Like, what is your purpose? And all of these things. And like, you're just gonna try and like take out my family, which is all that I'm trying to protect, and you've been lying to me all this time. How am I supposed to trust you now? And blah, 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 blah. And Darrow essentially is like, I want this society to be changed, and I believe that this society can be good because of you. Like, you are a perfect example of why I believe that this can be good. And he has this line where he's like, and if I'm wrong, then shoot me now. And it's this really tense moment, and she doesn't shoot him, but instead she just walks away and leaves. And so we don't really know how she feels, what she's doing in the situation. She's gone from the book after this point. But Darrow ends up coming back to Mars and is to be crowned victorious by Augustus. At this crowning, Augustus asks Darrow if he can adopt him. Darrow agrees, but he was a little curious and had asked questions about, well, what about, you know, Mustang? What about your son? Because the Jackal is his true heir. And this is when Augustus says, it's actually the Jackal's idea. It was his suggestion. And immediately that is a huge red flag, because this man is wicked and something isn't right. Like, why would he want to give up this power that he is so desperately craving and giving it to me? Very, very strange. But Darrow, for some reason, I don't know, there's nothing really into it. He's like, okay, but yeah, I agree to do so, whatever. They proceed with this, and Roke is the one that is going to present him with this box that is just part of this ceremony. And when Darrow opens the box, it reveals that internally he starts like freaking out and panicking and looking for people that he knows around him. They don't reveal what it was in this box until the end, so I'm just gonna wait a little bit and then I'll do the same thing. But Roke then comes up to him and like shakes hands with him and paralyzes him with like a needle that was in this ring. And this is a callback to earlier. Darrow had done that in the beginning of this book to Roke. Whenever he was originally wanting to bomb the gala, he had paralyzed Roke in his room in order to like keep him away from it, because he loved him and cared for him, but he just never fully trusted him. So he's been betrayed, and then this slaughter breaks out all around him. Lorne is killed. The Jackal goes up to Augustus and then like reveals that Darrow is Red. And Augustus essentially is still disgusted by his son, the Jackal, still doesn't trust him as a ruler and would not want him to have his throne, essentially. And so since the Jackal realizes that he's not going to get his father's approval, he kills him. And they leave Darrow there, paralyzed, for the Sovereign to take him and do whatever they want to do with him. And then at the end, it reveals that Darrow is sitting there internally thinking of well, there's no hope, there's no one here because Victra was there and she got injured. Severo is gone, Mustang is gone off of this event, but everyone else around them has been killed. And the reason that there's no hope is because in the box was Fitchner's head. So Ares is dead. And so this means that the rebellion dies. And so that's how this book ends, is it ends with Darrow trapped and is going to be given up to the Sovereign, paralyzed. Mustang, he revealed himself to her and she's just gone. We don't know what she thought, what she's gonna do. Severo was off planet and he was trying to actually find his dad. He hadn't talked to him, and so he was off trying to look for Fitchner, and so he's somewhere. But all of his other allies are murdered, and the Jackal is now going to rule Mars and take Augustus's throne and put into action whatever wicked plan that he had, and has isolated Darrow completely and has given him up for slaughter. So that is how this book ends. It was incredibly intense. A lot of action goes on. There's a lot of turmoil, a huge baseline of trust. He didn't trust Tactus, and whenever he did, he ended up wrecking the plans, essentially. And then he never trusted Roke, and so towards the end, Roke ended up betraying him. He didn't trust Mustang, but then the time that she did, she left, and so it leaves him just so alone. Severo knows what he is and trusts him and will do anything for him, but it's not in a equal sort of thing. It's very heartbreaking. I gave it a 4 stars only because it was kind of a tough read, but I still loved so much of it. It was an amazing book, and I really can't wait to see how book 3 goes in the resolution of this, because it is so tense, and I just can't wait to see what the rest of the story holds. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you guys will come back to see the next one.